sorry, we had a little internet bobble there. We will try again. Okay, where were we? We were talking about A, B, and C races. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I think it probably, I saw your video freeze just as I was finishing the idea of competition goals. So I'll do that one again. Hopefully nothing gets left out.
Okay.
But our competition goals would be a personal record, a podium, finish your first time at a longer distance. So let's say you were doing sprint level and you said, you know what, I've volunteered at Rocket Man and I think I could do that. So that's your first race at a longer distance. Those could probably very easily be classified as an A race. Now, how many of those you can have in a year, we'll get to that a little bit later. The next one is your training opportunities. And as I stated earlier, understanding your schedule and how your training plan goes throughout the year, there are opportunities in your structured training plan to say, hey, it's time for me to do a time trial on my bike, for instance. Well, you could enter a race and you could do the swim and the run at zone 1 or zone 2, but you could just go all out on the bike. Now, that may be hard for certain people, certain personalities, but it really does give you a chance to see how would I perform in race conditions, because it's different than just getting out there and riding by yourself. So there's ways to do that. As I mentioned, full out in one event, low at the other two. You can get in a competitive relay. You could just do training pace for all 3 events if you want to, zone 2 or zone 1.
I even love the idea, what you said about using the bike as a time trial. You think, it's useful to have your race kind of be like is my goal for this other race realistic?
Yes.
I'd like to hold this pace on the bike ride. Do I think I can, kind of thing.
And one of the other things is you can look at those races as a chance to improve on your transitions. We always sort of leave transition training like, I'll do that later. And then you get to race day and you look at your transition time, you go, oh my gosh, that person that beat me by 10 seconds, their transition time was 30 seconds faster than me. So take those as opportunities. And I will say, when I finally started doing this, I was actually surprised that I was fast. Even though I was going at lower zones, I was still hitting the podium on some of these races. So don't think that just because you're in zone 2 that you're not going to be competitive. Number 3 is just enjoyment. Val and I do things called vacation races now, where we find some cool place and we're just going there just to have fun. And all I'm worried about is just the people laughing, having a good time, seeing someplace new. And the race itself is just, I could care less what time I come in on. I'm just having a good time. Something else might be just, you get together with some other people and do a non-competitive relay. So all of you are just out there on a relay and you're having a great time and enjoying life.
You're there for the t-shirt.
Yeah.
Or shameless plug for Swim Hobbs Island, you're there for the ice cream.
There you go.
We do have an all-you-can-eat Swim Hobbs Island ice cream bar after our race, so that's a priority for a lot of people. Definitely make that your A race so you can come get your ice cream. That's really good. And so you recommend people document this somehow. They're going to have some sort of document that's going to, write down what they're going to do, and then possibly even use this annual training plan thing that like we use when we coach. Kind of maybe talk about how you like to use the ATP and annual training plan and how you see that.
So I think the important thing is if to doing an annual training plan on your own can be sort of overwhelming, especially the first time. Now, Training Peaks does a great job. They've got multiple articles about how to do it and understanding, your intensity factors and your stress scores and all this stuff and how you can only peak so many times. So I don't know if there's a way we can put those 2 web links up there that I sent in the notes for when someplace on our website. But having an annual training plan is going to not only hopefully slowly raise your fitness during the race season, it will at least maintain it during the off season. There's so many things that happen where we have gone through this season and we've done great. And then all of a sudden we just, instead of taking a week or two off, we just say, well, I'll get to the pool next month.
Mhm.
Well, I'll get on the trainer. I really don't like riding the trainer. Having that training plan in front of you, is sort of a motivator to at least stay at a good fitness level. And trust me, the first 2 years I did triathlon, I didn't do nothing for the winter time. And it showed. It took me a good 2.5 months to get back to the level I was at before I just quit doing stuff.
Mhm.
So one of the things you ask yourself or ask your coach, what are my periodization cycles? When does my current plan have me peaking? And if you don't know what this is, then your coach can explain it to you and actually walk you through it on your Training Peaks calendar. I would say that knowing why you're doing something and not just doing it is much more powerful. It helps us stay motivated,
Mhm.
and that motivation helps us improve our results.
Yeah, I was just going to say something about motivation. One of the things that I heard a famous swimmer say one time was, the times that we feel demotivated a lot of times are based on either not knowing the process that we're going through, like we have a coach that's handling all of that for us, and so there's no buy-in, or we just don't see progress. We feel like we're showing up every day for workouts, but we don't see anything changing. And that's why I really love the ATP and the training plan, the Training Peaks kind of world, because in Training Peaks, there are graphs. And for those of us that love numbers, it can be very motivating to see a graph and see your fitness literally climbing every day. It's going up. And then just to know that there might not be measurable progress in terms of times or paces, but you can actually see yourself getting fitter as Training Peaks sees you, as the model sees you. And sometimes that can just be a little bit of a mental boost to help you, get through those moments where you're just like, I just don't feel like I'm going anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the other things you want to do for yourself or with your coach is review your history and what worked. And how we talked about, have you tended to overtrain? If you have, then you have to come up with a plan to keep you from overtraining. Don't just say, I'm not going to do it. You have to actually understand your plan. And if you have a tendency, let's say, use our stress scores, for example, our intensity factors. If your stress score for that workout was supposed to be 35 and you're hitting 50, you're overtraining. And you've got to learn the discipline to hold back so that you have to go slower so you can go faster. I say this to some of my athletes right now. And are you a person who tries to make up a missed workout? If you do, you are dabbling in the area of where you're going to hurt yourself, because your body and your plan is meant for you to only have so much stress during a given day. And you may think, well, I'll just make this workout up today and not look and see that the very next day, your stress score is supposed to be very high for a very intense workout, and you have not allowed your body to recover enough to handle that next day's workout. Yeah. So these are things you want to try to understand and realize, again, that you're not overtraining. Other than that, you want to look at making a commitment to improve your lower poor performance. So write down those goals. What is it you want to do? One of the things for me, I went out way too fast on the runs a lot of times, and I'd blow up after about a mile. My heart rate was just maxed out, and I'd end up having to slow down. And I may have gone at this wonderful pace for the first mile of the 5K, but by the time it was all over, if I would have gone out slowly and gone with that concept of negative splits where you get a little bit faster every half mile, every mile, my race time on some of those runs would have been 45 to a minute faster. And that's a big thing on a 5K run. So understand those things and understand what you're doing wrong. And you can use those on any of your races, but you can really use that for those improvements on your B races where you're using that as a training opportunity.
And you kind of see where your engine is, like you said, you're running out of gas, like where you're doing that. That's true. And I think I love the idea of the strategy of starting slower, sort of building your run or building each of the events. That's definitely a strategy that is so good. And it's so hard because you get out there, you get excited, you want to stay with the crowd. I think I've maybe told this story before, but last year, the Huntsville Sprint was reversed. And so it had the run first and then the bike and then the swim. And there was this really fast girl that took off at the beginning of the run, and I was trying to hang with her just because I thought I can hang with her. And she went out in a 7:30, and I stayed with her. And then I backed off on the second mile and I ran an 8:30. And then the third mile I ran a 9:30 because I was whooped. And it was just the reverse of that. It was just, I was excited. I took off. I was feeling good. It was cool in the morning. You know, the run is never first. And so you never get to do that. But it was such a, just a pitiful way to run the race because the bike ride was miserable because I'd spiked my heart rate already. And so that's such a good idea to kind of, you know, give yourself a plan, not only for your season, but for each of your races, and use that race as training. And I certainly use that race as training for not ever to do that again. Go out fast. But I learned something, and that was just a C race for me, but it was definitely a learning experience. It functioned exactly as it was supposed to. So I didn't really taper for it, but your next point, you'd kind of mentioned about tapering, and really you would kind of only taper for an A race. So I wasn't really tapered for my race other than, I don't know, maybe walking my bike to the car from the car rather than riding it, you know. But tapering is a really powerful tool. But when, you know, how does somebody know when they should taper in their race plan?
So again, I think your point that a true taper is really only needed for an A race. And again, just so everybody understands what tapering is, you've been going along, and you have been doing anywhere from 8 to 30 hours a week of training, depending on what race you're racing for. When your taper, it could be a couple of days, it could be a week, it could be a week and a half in some cases. Again, this depends on your age, injury history, and things like that, and how your body's feeling. But that taper is going to really significantly take you down to about 25% of what you've been doing. It's just enough to keep the muscles firing and remembering that this is what it feels like to run. This is what it feels like to swim. This is what it feels like to bike. And generally, a true taper is going to, in those last couple of days leading up to the race, they're going to be very short burst of energy, just to get you that feeling of, I'm like the wind.
Yeah.
Now, how would we use tapering or understanding that if you're doing a B race or a C race? Let's say you do have a B race scheduled, but it's 1 week after a very hard session, because you're either on a 3-week or a 4-week cycle in Training Peaks, where you'll go 2 weeks, hard, harder, recovery, or you'll go 3 weeks, hard, harder, hardest, recovery. Let's say your B race is going to land on a hard or harder, a week after a hard or a harder. You don't want to do a super hard workout leading up to that B race either, because you're just not going to have the energy to do a full triathlon. So you can adjust your training during that week. And one of the examples I had was you can rearrange. If you had a hard cycling workout the week before the race, you can plug in something that's a little bit easier there and move that cycling workout on your race day. And you can really go all out. I tend to go to the cycling part because that's my favorite and my strongest thing, but you could do that for swimming. You can do that for running. So just, be aware that, again, don't have such a hard workout the week before a B race or a C race that you can't enjoy, or at least practice what you want to practice in your B race without being exhausted.
So it's not that you're totally backing off with the B and the C race, you're just you're backing off some, you're letting yourself not have a full recovery. It's kind of like, I guess, when swimming, when you're doing repeats, you wouldn't let your heart rate go all the way back down to 99 or whatever. You're going to keep it up a little. You're going to kind of keep that workout level a little bit higher, but you're not going to back all the way off like you would for an A race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that that's a lot of information, and without actual something to show in front of everybody, you might be confused on that. And if anybody has any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll spend some time walking through what that really means. And once you see it on a training calendar, it probably would make more sense.
I feel like too that book that was written years ago, it's been so long since I read it, but it just makes me think of it. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. You remember that book? It's like Zen, the Art of Tapering, because tapering is such an art. And to be able to taper for an A race, first of all, just knowing yourself or your coach knowing you well enough to be able to set you up for a really good A race is such an art. And it's even more of an art for B's and C's, because how much is too much of a drop? And I think you gain so much knowledge tapering for B's and C races, even if you give yourself just a little bit of, I wouldn't call it even tapering, but like resting slightly for a B race, where
Right.
you learn like, oh, whoops, that was way too much. I had way too much gas in the tank. Now I know for my A race, definitely do not taper back so much. You know, I had an athlete a few years ago who we found that he just needed a lot of taper. And I knew that this guy was related to me, and I need a huge taper for an A race. I mean, 2.5 weeks of almost nothing. That's what works for me, because I just carry fatigue so deeply. And so, yeah, learning that about each athlete and about yourself is a real art, and it's not easy, and it takes several seasons. One of my coaches, I think I say this every webinar, he always used to say, you learn how to race. You have to learn how to race the race before you can race the race. And you have to learn yourself as an athlete before you can really taper successfully. So I really believe in the taper, and I believe that it is like, it's like a Zen thing.
It is, and it changes every year. It's changed for me in the last year drastically.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Where I would have to basically just only taper for maybe 2 or 3 days before a race, or I wouldn't do a whole lot. Now I found that the week leading up to a race, I need those to be all very easy workouts, just for fun, you know, low intensity factors, low stress scores. And then as I, you know, and that's just leads into this next thing about how much should I taper? It's a personal question. I can't give every person the same answer. They have to work with me, and I have to help them understand their recovery times and how they feel, and some other things that are important. You need to let your coach know, or you need to be aware of, hey, the week before the race, I've got this huge project due at the office, and I'm going to put in 12-hour days. That's going to affect your performance, and you need to plan that taper based on that, because mental exhaustion can be just as bad as physical exhaustion. So, you know, be honest and open and say, hey, it's okay if you've got a lot of stuff on your plate. It's okay to say, I just got all this going on. Your coach is going to be able to say, guess what? We can tweak this a little bit to make it a little easier for you. And we may not want those 2 weeks leading up to that race. We may want to taper somewhat over the 2-week period instead of a 1 week, because we want you to use the training time in those 2 weeks as a mental stress relief, as opposed to a physical stressor to improve you. So those are some things to keep in mind.
That's so good.
I mean, the age and fitness level, my fitness level based on all my stats is a little bit better than it was when I was 57. But my recovery time is, as I said earlier, is nowhere near what it used to be. It's doubled, and in some cases tripled what it used to be. So just be aware of that. Our bodies age, and it's okay if they age. You can still stay in great physical shape. You can still be very competitive if you want to be. But, you know, don't, I was sent a little something by my wife, Valerie, the other week. It says, you've come to the age where your mind says you can do it, and your body says you'll be sorry. So,
I love that.
Just don't overextend yourself.
That's so good. That's so good. Not to tell on my husband, which, because I think he can hear this webinar, but there was a moment where at one point we had I think that it was an oven that was sitting on our front porch, and I was supposed to help him carry it to put in the back of the truck. And I turned around, and he is carrying it by himself. And I was like, what are you doing? You have had 2 back surgeries. Like, what? But he was totally just like, da, 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 da. And I thought, well, okay. And he did it. I mean, gotta hand it to him. He did it. But that was exactly it. I mean, it was like, he just thinks he can do it. And then sometimes he's wrong and sometimes he's right. But I also see this oven going across the yard. I thought, oh my gosh. But yeah, he was totally capable, and he carried the oven. But you're right. We need to be thinking about that as we get older, and being I guess, maybe cautious and realistic about what our recovery time should be, and think about that. And as our taper changes from age to age, how that's going to affect maybe how we prioritize our races A, B, and C, because we're going to need a longer runway for that taper. And we're going to need more recovery time between each, whereas it might have been possible to do races a month apart to, you know, an Olympic and then a half Ironman, you know, back 5 years ago. Like you said, it's changed significantly just in the last 4 years for you. So that's huge for people to recognize, even young people, that it changes, and it can change based on, like you said, stress and normal life. One thing that Training Peaks has, the tool that we use for coaching people, you know this, but just for everybody else, is that it has this graph, like we talked about it. It uses model parameters based on your workout intensity and such, and duration and frequency, to figure out kind of where you are fitness wise. And it uses like a point system to do that. And we call it, Training Peaks calls it the training stress score, but everyone can also call it the suffer score. It's like, how much are you suffering in that workout? But there's no suffer score for work stress, and there's no suffer score for kids being rotten, and there's no suffer score for having a new baby or having to travel or flying, which is very stressful on the body. I mean, think how just different that is from your normal life. If you were a human before the age of flight, I mean, going in the air and flying across time zones, it's incredibly stressful for the body. So all of that, there's no score for that in Training Peaks, but it does affect, you know, your taper and how you feel and all of that. So that's a really good point that you made, to make sure that you consider all the potential things in life. And maybe someday they'll come up with, and there probably is, some kind of fancy ring that you can wear. I think the Aura ring is one of those they're trying to use, that measures your heart rate variability, and that's been touted as a new thing, you know, in the last decade, of really being able to tell where we're at. But I still think we go back to, it is still an art, and that's why I think, even as fancy as all the data gets, it really, just like you said, it comes down to how you feel. It does.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's really good. That's really cool. And so I love the idea that, you know, this will help people come up with a better way, or just a new way to think about their season, a new way to kind of think about what races they want to do and what events they want to do, and be able to space them out properly in a way that gives them the best opportunity to do well. And I think that one thing to recognize and remember is race, you know, we, as race directors, we as a group, we do not plan our races caring too much about each other's races and when they are. So, you know, it isn't like we're like, oh, we should probably have this a month out from that, because, you know, even in the Huntsville community with the Team Rocket, we don't plan them and say, well, we need a month between this race and this race so people can rest. It's more just like, that's a good day to have the race, and so we're having it that day. So, you know, if you're doing all the Team Rocket races, yeah, that could get pretty exhausting throughout the summer. We try to have it so that our volunteers aren't getting worn out, but we certainly are not thinking about how it's spaced out for the athletes. So that is something you want to keep track of, is just, you know, because they're local races, if they're too close together, they're too close together for you. So put that in mind as you start thinking about, you know, what you might do. And maybe people already have a plan for this year. I think a lot of people kind of know what they're wanting to do. But I know that, for example, the Swim Hobbs Island race is part of the Tennessee Triple Crown, which is 3 different races, and it's a 5-mile swim for the Swim Hobbs Island. There's a 6.25-mile swim that's up in Knoxville that's called Bridges the Bluffs. And there's the Swim the Suck, which is in Chattanooga. And those races are all within a month, all 3 of them, all within 4 weeks. And so you really got to be fit and ready. And those are definitely one of those where they can almost all be A's, because they're so close together, and you're just going to have to kind of manage, you know, and train for that. But how would you give advice to someone who's doing something like that, where they have these 3 like destination races that they want to do them, and they're trying to hold a taper for a whole month or something? You know, what is your advice to athletes for that kind of situation?
You know, that's a hard one, because I think you have to look at the goals for each of those races and determine if they're realistic. Personal example for myself, several years ago, the Heel and Crank used to be the weekend before Bridge Street half marathon, and it also would often fall on or it was, I'm sorry, Heel and Crank was a Saturday before Bridge Street, and Oak Barrel half marathon was the weekend before. So my A-type personality, they used to give a little award if you did Heel and Crank and Bridge Street, you know, within those 2 days, you went 39.8 miles or something like that of total distance. So you got a special little award. But I wanted to do Oak Barrel really bad because it's one of my favorite races. So I said, yeah, I'll just do them all.
Just do it.
Well, I had a nice race at Oak Barrel, and I had a whole week of recovery, and I really didn't do a whole lot leading up to heel and crank. But I got to heel and crank, and I was supposed to do it just to say that I did it.
Mhm.
And I got there on race day, and my mind was stolen by aliens, and I tried to do as fast as I could on that whole race.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was disappointing because it wasn't good enough for me to even get on the podium. But I wore myself out so bad that for the last 2 miles of Bridge Street, I was cramping so bad I almost fell to my knees a couple of times. So
Okay.
if you're going to do something like that, be realistic about the goals of each race, and then really, again, work on that discipline by maybe doing some B races before them, where you force yourself to be with the adrenaline of race day. You're saying, no, I'm staying in zone 2. I've got to stay in zone 2. I've got to learn this discipline. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to navigate that.
That's good advice, because I think that, and not only in the case of Swim Hobbs Island and the Triple Crown there, but a lot of that is happening now with races. Either the swim gets canceled and someone's like, oh shoot, I didn't get to do that race like I wanted, so 2 weeks from now there's this other one coming up, so I'll just go do that one. That happens a lot with racing. And I know with COVID period, it happened where this race was canceled, so well, we're just going to go do this one, it's a month later. But it does kind of throw everything up in the air. And so you're saying kind of the advice would be, try it out in some B races or some B workouts where you're going to just try to hold zone 2, and whereas before you might have gone a little harder. Because they're so close together, you kind of have to back off your intensity and maybe your goals a little bit. As far as pace, it might just be more about process goals for those races.
It's when you're doing something like that where they're just back to back to back, you have to, unless you're an elite athlete and you're going to get paid, you really have to be realistic about, I don't care how fast I finish. I care that I finish these so that I can say, hey, I did the Triple Crown. I mean, because what percentage of people have ever done it? Even if within the state, probably less than 1/10 of 1%. That's a huge achievement right there. And you have to be satisfied with that achievement, as opposed to, oh, my swim per 100 meters was off by 15 seconds.
That's right. And you certainly can't have that goal at Swim Hobbs, because we have an uphill swim. So you always have an excuse to be like, well, I swam 240s. Who cares if that's a slow swim for you? Yeah, that's really good. I love that. That is a question that I hear a lot from folks, is kind of how to plan when unexpected things happen. I got sick for my goal race, so I can't do it. So what about this other one that's 3 weeks later? Can I do that? How do I do that? So, and of course, I think, everybody should recognize too, like, a plan is just that. It's just a plan. We try. And not to pressure themselves that just because you have a plan on the schedule, it's not in stone. You can always adjust. In fact, the best plans are ones that have to change, because those are ones that you kind of have to work with. And it's a real successful training season isn't always the one where you hit every single workout and every single thing, because if you did that, that would mean that there's no human element involved. There's no going back and asking yourself how you felt, or like taking into account how you responded to those workouts. You're just following the plan blindly. Whereas if you realize, wow, I'm really worn out after that workout, I can't continue at this rate. So you have to change the training plans, or you may have to change your race schedule to adjust. That, to me, that's going to make you a better athlete, because your plan changed. You became more athletic IQ. You have a higher athletic IQ and became more aware as an athlete. So
very true.
Those things do happen, I guess.
One of my favorite sayings was from Heartbreak Ridge, where Clint Eastwood would say, adapt and overcome.
Oh, I love it. That's great. Oh, that should be our company motto, shouldn't it? I like
adapt
that.
and overcome. Yes.
Yes. When I used to work for the Scouts, I used to work at a ranch out in New Mexico. They had a motto for their Rangers, and it was scramble, be flexible. So it was the idea that when you got to scramble, you really do. You're kind of frenetic for a while, and you figure out all the things. Be flexible, be able to adapt. And so I love. We could maybe put it together: scramble, be flexible, adapt, and then overcome.
There you go.
That's really good. I love that. Well, cool. Well, hopefully we'll hear from some people with some more questions if anybody else wants to ask them about this idea. And it sounds like we've got enough information here too, where there could be more of a deep dive at some point about just tapering, and tapering as a concept. I think that would be a very good concept that we could request some questions about tapering and how it works.
Sure.
So, and it definitely differs, between sports, swim taper is different from the bike taper, different from the run taper. So that'd be a good one too for us to dive into sometime. No
Yeah.
pun intended. Well, that's great. Well, I really appreciate anything else before we close it out. Anything else you want to mention?
No, I hope people got something out of this. And if it caused more questions, that's even better, because
Yeah,
that means people are thinking. And if you have questions, reach out to us. We're happy to, give free advice. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
up to a
We're
point,
like,
right?
yeah, we're like that Lucy and the Peanuts comic. We have the free
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
5 cents.
I'm not gonna make a training plan for you for free, but I can answer your questions about it.
Yeah. You might
And
hold
then
the
just
football.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say you might hold the football, like in the Peanuts comics. Yeah.
And just always remember my favorite saying about triathlon is compete with joy.
Compete with joy. That's right. Compete with joy. I love that. Maybe that should be our company motto. Fantastic. Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your thoughts on all of this. It was really fun to get to think about A, B's, and C's, 1, 2, 3s. And now I'm going to have to go listen to that song. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week and join us next month. Hopefully we will be having Suzanne Erickson on to talk about Trek travel. So we'll see how that goes. If we can't get it done for June, we'll definitely have it in July. So awesome. Well, have a great day. Thanks again, Mike, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.